Today, we sail into the North Atlantic winter of 1900, a realm of black water, howling gales, and islands carved like broken teeth. At the edge of the world, the Flannan Isles crouched in silence, their cliffs shrouded with legends of spirits and vanished monks. On Eilean Mòr, a brand new lighthouse blazed against the dark, tended by 3 men whose duty was to keep its flame alive. But when a relief ship arrived after Christmas, the light was burning and the men were gone. Inside, clocks had stopped. Oilskins hung on their pegs. A table sat half-laid, as though time itself had been interrupted mid-breath. No bodies, no farewells, no explanation. Just an island that had swallowed its keepers whole, leaving behind a question that still claws at history's walls. What really happened on the Flannan Isles? A logbook, weather-stained and trembling with the fingerprints of men who vanished. December 15th, 1900. Storm ended, sea calm. God is over all. The handwriting is jagged, almost frantic, as though the writer was clinging to sanity with every looping letter. Yet, when the relief vessel finally anchored at Eilean Mòr, a tiny, windswept shard of rock in the Outer Hebrides, they found the lighthouse empty, not just unattended, but eerily stripped of presence. 3 keepers gone. No sign of struggle. Beds unmade but cold. Oilskins missing, as if the men had walked out in the worst weather of their lives. But here's the part that has gnawed at historians, folklorists, and night shift conspiracy theorists for over a century. The clocks inside the lighthouse had stopped. Every single one. Time arrested in the middle of the Atlantic gales, as if it had staged a walkout with the men. And when rescuers searched the island, they discovered ropes, normally secured in a storage crate, strewn across jagged rocks far below the cliffs. Imagine that. 3 professional keepers, men trained to stare down the fury of the North Atlantic, swallowed whole by the silence of a rock. The diary's last words, "God is over all," feel less like devotion and more like surrender. Was it faith? Was it fear? Or was it the sound of someone trying to make peace with an ending no one else would ever witness? We read it now like a death rattle committed to paper. No bodies were found. No shouts were heard. Just a beacon, burning away into nothing, waiting for men who would never return to trim its flame. Close your eyes and place yourself in the year 1900, standing on the edge of civilization. The Outer Hebrides, a cluster of jagged stones scattered like teeth in the Atlantic, each one gnawed raw by wind and salt. Eilean Mòr, part of the Flannan Isles, wasn't paradise. It was punishment. No trees, no farmland, no neighbors. Just endless cliffs and waves slamming against basalt, day after day, until the sound hollowed out your skull. It's the kind of place where silence is weight and loneliness grows teeth. At the time, lighthouses were the skeletal guardians of empire. Britain was obsessed with its shipping lanes, its proud industrial arteries, its illusion of control over a wild sea. Ships carried coal, grain, empire itself, and those waters around the Hebrides were deadly. Storms brewed there without warning, shredding sails, snapping masts, and turning hulls into coffins. So, the Northern Lighthouse Board planted their gleaming eye on Eilean Mòr in 1899, only a year before the keepers would vanish. It was a triumph of Victorian engineering, a tower of stone and steel, its lantern piercing miles into the dark, a promise to sailors that civilization hadn't abandoned them. But promises don't stop isolation from poisoning the mind. For the keeper stationed there, life was a routine of brutal monotony. Keeping logs, trimming wicks, hauling coal, staring out at endless gray. Weeks without visitors, months without family. Letters carried in only when supply boats managed to fight through the swells. Every day was the same, except for the days when nature reminded you who was in charge. Imagine standing on that rock during winter. Gales that roar like a choir of demons, waves taller than the tower itself, rain that slices the skin. You begin to understand why locals whisper about the place being cursed, haunted by spirits older than Christianity. The Flannan Isles had a reputation before the lighthouse was ever built. Shepherds who graze their sheep there refuse to stay overnight, muttering about fairies, phantom monks, and voices carried on the wind. Even their name, the Seven Hunters, felt like a threat rather than comfort. The church once built on the island had long fallen into ruin, and pilgrims who visited it never lingered. Something about Eilean Mòr was seen as inhospitable to the living, a rock better suited for ghosts. And yet, against this backdrop of superstition and storm, 3 men were posted to tend a machine of light. Civilized progress hammering its flag into the mouth of the void. What could possibly go wrong? 3 men, each swallowed by history yet still whispering through it. Thomas Marshall, Donald MacArthur, and James Duckett. Their names alone don't raise goosebumps, but their absence, oh, that's another matter. Marshall was the second assistant keeper, a young man in his 20s, but already hardened by the grind of lighthouse life. His entries in the logbook give him away, meticulous, almost obsessive. He notes winds, pressures, moods. He's the kind of man who measures chaos with neat handwriting, as if putting words to paper could cage the storm outside and the storm inside. But his last entries twist. They turn shaky, emotional, severe winds, prayed, and the one that haunts every retelling. God is over all. Marshall, it seems, was not a man at peace. Donald MacArthur, the occasional keeper, he wasn't supposed to be there full time. He was a relief, a stand-in, a burly man with a temper known back on the mainland. In the log, Marshall even writes about MacArthur crying. Crying, this man, rough and tough, described as breaking down in tears. The official line insists he was steady, reliable. The unofficial line whispers. Maybe the island worked his way under his skin, prying into cracks he didn't know he had. And James Duckett, the principal keeper, the man in charge, older, experienced, the anchor for the others. Steady as a stone he lived on, but perhaps too steady, like a man so used command that when the unexpected comes, he can't bend with it. Duckett's silence in the records is terrifying. No breakdowns, no drama, no slips of faith. Just nothing. If the others were spiraling, was Duckett holding the line? Or was he simply erasing himself into stoicism while everything unraveled? 3 men, drawn from different corners of life, chained together by duty to a tower of light. You could romanticize it. Men battling the elements, heroes holding a lantern against the abyss. But the reality? They were prisoners. Not by bars, but by water. The ocean was their warden, isolation their daily ration. And it's worth noting, none of these men were amateurs. They weren't tourists stumbling into danger. They were professionals, trained for monotony and madness alike. The Northern Lighthouse Board didn't send fools to places like Eilean Mòr, which is exactly why their vanishing cuts deeper than some simple storm. These men knew storms. They knew protocol. They knew better. And yet, something or someone or nothing at all erased them from the island without leaving a single trace. Imagine that lighthouse. Windows staring like blind eyes, while the ocean around it kept roaring, indifferent to the fact that 3 men had been claimed by silence. It began with absence. That's the thing about lighthouses. You don't get the luxury of disappearing quietly. They're supposed to be the ever-watchful eye, never blinking, never faltering. But in December of 1900, ships passing the Flannan Isles began reporting something deeply unsettling: darkness. The Eilean Mòr light, that artificial star meant to carve through the storms, had gone out. Mariners wrote it down with dread, as though noting the death of a guardian angel. For sailors, a missing light isn't just negligence, it's betrayal. So the relief vessel Hesperus was dispatched on December 26th, 11 days after the logs went silent. Picture it. Christmas just passed, the sea rolling cold as iron, and the ship's captain peering through the mist expecting to see 3 keepers trudging down to greet them. Instead, nothing. No movement, no figures, no smoke from a stove. The island looked deserted. When they finally landed, the tension only deepened. The entrance gate to the lighthouse compound was shut. Inside, the door stood unlocked, the beds unmade, the clock hands frozen in defiance of time itself. The table was set but untouched, like a meal had been abandoned mid-bite. One chair was tipped slightly, almost imperceptibly, enough to whisper of haste. And the most chilling detail, 2 sets of oilskins were missing, the waterproof gear needed to face the weather. But the 3rd set remained, hanging neatly on its hook. Whoever left last, if they left together at all, had gone into the storm unprotected. The search of the island revealed signs more cryptic than reassuring. Down at the West Landing, the waves had smashed into the cliffs with violence enough to twist iron railings like paper. A box of ropes had been appended, its contents strewn across the rocks as though plucked out by some unseen hand. The logs hinted at gales violent, punishing, but there was no entry describing the men's final act, no farewell, no we're going out. Just silence. The Hesperus crew combed every inch of that island, calling the men's names, scouring the gullies. Nothing. No bodies, no footprints in the sodden earth, no evidence of struggle. It was as if the keepers had stepped off the edge of the island into thin air. And in that moment, reality cracked into folklore. Sailors whispered about sea serpents, spirits, phantom ships. Officials muttered about accidents. Families demanded answers. But all anyone could say for certain was this: 3 men entered the storm, and not a single soul walked back. It's one thing for men to vanish. It's another for their final words, preserved in a logbook, to read like the unraveling of sanity. Marshall's notes told of terrible storms, seas never seen before, and MacArthur, the tough, brawling relief keeper, weeping like a child. He even wrote that all 3 prayed together, as though cornered by something larger than wind and water. Here's the problem. The weather records for that week don't match the terror described. Onshore stations reported only moderate gales, nothing remotely catastrophic. So either the island was lashed by some freak microstorm that evaded every mainland barometer, or those log entries weren't describing weather at all. Imagine that. 3 grown men trained for this life, praying and sobbing in unison. Not because of wind, but because of something else clawing at the edge of their world. And then comes the most maddening detail. The final log entry, December 15th, reads, "Storm ended, sea calm. God is over all." That's not a weather report. It's a resignation, a surrender to something unspeakable. Yet when the Hespers arrived 11 days later, there was no evidence of storm damage except at the West Landing. Iron railings twisted, turf ripped out, ropes scattered. But ropes don't scatter themselves. Something dragged them out. The contradictions only multiplied. If all 3 men went down to the landing to secure equipment, why would the last leave his oilskins hanging? No sane keeper braves those elements without them. Did one man follow the others in desperation, without pause and dress, convinced something urgent demanded immediate action? Or was he forced? And then the silence of the island itself. No carcasses of seabirds, no evidence of men tumbling into waves, no scraps of clothing caught on jagged rock. Just nothingness. It's as if the sea had swallowed them whole, not even bothering to spit out bones. Locals began to murmur. Had the island claimed them, as it had always threatened to? The Flannans had long been said to be haunted by cloaked figures, monks who once prayed there until madness or starvation took them. Fishermen swore that eerie chants carried across the waves on quiet nights. Some even claim the keepers have been lured, like moths to a flame, by voices not of this world. So was it waves? Was it madness? Was it something darker, older, patient as the stone of the island itself? The deeper you stare into the empty lighthouse, the more its silence starts to whisper, and the more you realize that every answer breeds 3 new questions, none of them kind. The official investigation, led by Robert Muirhead of the Northern Lighthouse Board, tried to smother the hysteria with bureaucracy. His conclusion was tidy. The men were swept away by a rogue wave while securing ropes and equipment at the West Landing. Nature, in her fury, had done what she always does, chew and swallow. Neat, rational, filed away in the ledger. Except the story wouldn't stay buried under paperwork. For one, Muirhead's own inspection report betrayed unease. He noted the bizarre state of the West Landing. Ropes scattered, railings bent like toys, turf torn from the earth as if something had clawed upward rather than crashed downward. And still no bodies. Even in violent seas, the Hebrides cough up their dead, but the ocean kept its silence. So the theories multiplied. Some whispered a murder-suicide, that MacArthur, known for his hot temper, snapped after weeks of isolation. Perhaps a fight broke out. Perhaps blood was shed. Perhaps 2 men fell and the last followed, unable to face the void of being alone on that island. But again, the evidence refuses cooperation. There was no blood, no sign of struggle, no violence carved into the walls. Just absence. Others leaned into folklore. The Flannan Isles had always been called cursed. Locals claimed the little people, fae or spirits, resented human intrusion. The keepers, they said, were taken, spirited away. One ballad even claimed they'd been snatched by a phantom ship, vanishing into its spectral crew. Romantic nonsense? Maybe, but when rationality cracks, folklore pours in like floodwater. And then there's a psychological theory, isolation sickness. Modern psychologists know what confinement and monotony can do. Hallucinations, paranoia, sudden, overwhelming panic. Imagine 3 men, weeks on end, staring at the same walls, listening to the same storm beat, watching one another unravel. Did one dash into gale and madness, the others following in a chain of desperate loyalty? That lone oilskin left behind suggests haste, irrational haste, as though one man bolted, and the others couldn't bear to let him vanish alone. Still, the rogue wave theory refuses to die. The Atlantic is merciless, after all. A freak surge had arisen without warning, dragged the men from the cliffs, shattered them against rock, then pulled them down into blackness. But then why the diary? Why the breakdowns, the weeping, the prayers, the sense of dread days before their disappearance? The logs read like prophecy, not routine, which leaves the most unsettling possibility. Maybe we don't understand what happened, because what happened wasn't meant for human comprehension. The lighthouse should have stood as a triumph of logic over chaos. Instead, it became a shrine of the fact that no amount of stone, steel, or training can protect us when the abyss decides it wants us back. There's a moment in every mystery where the rational scaffolding collapses, and you're left staring into the abyss with nothing but your own shadow for company. For the Flannan Keepers, that moment comes not with the vanishing itself, but with the timeline, because when you really dig into it, the sequence of events makes no sense. The lighthouse went dark on the night of December 15th. The logbook's final entry was that same day, claiming the storm had ended, the sea calm. Yet the men were already gone. Think about that. Whoever wrote those words, God is over all, was committing a final thought to paper even as he prepared to step into nothing. It wasn't routine bookkeeping. It was epitaph. And here's the crack that refuses to seal. Ships passing between December 15th and 26th reported perfectly calm weather around the Flannans. No storms. No towering waves. Just a black, dead lamp where the beacon should have burned. So if there was no storm, what were the keepers ascribing in those frantic entries? What force reduced a grown man to tears? What horror made all three huddle in prayer? If the sky above them was clear, this is where the case stops behaving like history and starts behaving like folklore. Conspiracists swarm in. Some claim foreign saboteurs landed on the island, silencing the keepers as part of some secret war game. Others mutter about sea monsters, colossal tentacles rising from the depths to snatch them off the rocks. And then there are those who look at the frozen clocks and the untouched meal and whisper about time itself. Did something slip in that place? Bend the rules, snatch 3 men into a pocket where minutes don't behave? It sounds insane, yet somehow it feels more plausible than 3 trained professionals wandering into the sea like careless children. The breakdown isn't just theirs. It's ours, the investigators, the readers, the late-night obsessives. We want the rogue wave to make sense. We want the diary to be exaggeration. We want the oilskins to be coincidence. But they pile up like stones on our chest until the official story feels thinner than sea spray. And so the Flannan Isles transformed. They stopped being a lonely post in the Hebrides and became something else entirely, a threshold, a place where men looked into the storm or into nothing at all and didn't come back, a place where the rules for 11 days in December simply broke. The Northern Lighthouse Board tied the ribbon neatly. Tragedy, not mystery. Their final report chalked it up to a brutal sea, a rogue wave crashing against a landing, sweeping the keepers into oblivion. End of story. Families were given condolences. The lighthouse was restaffed and officials moved on. But the island never let go of its questions. Why was one set of oilskins left behind? As if a man sprinted into the gale half-dressed. Why did the logbook describe storms that no other station confirmed? Why did 3 seasoned keepers, men trained to respect danger, ignore the golden rule? Never leave a lighthouse unattended. If the official theory holds, then all 3 abandoned their posts to secure equipment in a storm they shouldn't have been out in at all. That isn't just risky. It's against every regulation drilled into them. And if discipline broke down that completely, why no evidence of struggle or panic inside? No overturned furniture, no broken glass, no final scrawled note of desperation. Just a table set, a clock stopped, and silence. Some claim the board needed a tidy explanation. The public was restless. Sailors were terrified of cursed beacons. If lighthouses could devour their keepers, what faith could anyone place in them? Better to blame the sea, an enemy everyone already understood, than admit something stranger might be at work. And stranger possibilities abound. Did MacArthur's temper boil over into violence, the others trying to calm him, only to be dragged into disaster? Did they stumble upon something unnatural at the landing? Lights on the water, a ship that shouldn't exist, voices rising from the surf? Or, my favorite fever dream, was the last log entry not a statement of faith but a warning? God is over all. Not reassurance, but surrender. A man acknowledging he had seen something no prayer could hold back. No matter which theory you favor, the lingering truth is this: no bodies ever surfaced. The Atlantic is merciless, yes, but it is also a grave robber that rarely leaves no trace at all. For 3 men to vanish so cleanly feels less like drowning and more like erasure. The official resolution may have closed the file, but it didn't close the wound. The lighthouse kept shining, but behind its beam lingers shadow, the certainty that something had happened on Eilean Mòr that could never be explained. The lighthouse didn't stay empty for long. New keepers were assigned, because the sea doesn't care about ghosts or missing men. It just demands its light. But imagine being the replacements. You arrive on that barren rock, aware that the last crew simply evaporated. Every groan of the wind sounds like a warning. Every wave slamming against the cliff feels like a reenactment. You hang up your coat where another man still swayed 11 days before, and you wonder if you'll last any longer. The story leaked into culture almost instantly. Sailors carried in whispers, embellishing it with every retelling. Men dragged off by sea serpents, spirited away by fairies, abducted by phantom ships. On the mainland, newspapers flirted with scandal before settling into skepticism, parroting the official rogue wave line. But folklore doesn't care about headlines. In villages along the Hebrides, people sang ballads of the keepers who vanished into the storm. The Flannan Isles became shorthand for bad luck, for being swallowed by forces you can't name. Even today, the case ripples through pop culture. The band Genesis wrote a song about it. Poets spun stanzas about the Keepers 3. Ghost tours invoke it as proof the sea keeps secrets. And of course, conspiracy theorists have claimed everything from alien abduction to dimensional rifts. You laugh, but then you picture those empty oilskins at half-set table, that log ending with God is over all, and you stop laughing. What lingers most is the psychological scar. The idea that men so skilled, so disciplined, could vanish without explanation gnaws at the very concept of safety. If they weren't immune, who is? We like to imagine there are rules to survival. Follow protocol, respect the sea, keep your wits. But the Flannan Isles spit in the face of rules. They suggest that sometimes it doesn't matter how careful you are. The abyss simply chooses. Over a century later, the lighthouse is automated. No more keepers, no more lonely prayers against a gale. Machines don't cry. Machines don't vanish. But the automation feels less like progress and more like surrender, as though humanity finally admitted defeat. The sea claimed 3 men, and instead of replacing them, we handed the job to circuits and steel. The Flannan mystery survives not because of what we know, but because of what we can't shake off. The suspicion that on that December night, something ancient and merciless reached out of the dark and reminded us how small we really are. Here's the image that won't leave me. 3 sets of boots by the door, 3 men staring at each other as the wind howled, one of them deciding to step outside without his coat. Why? What did he hear? What did he see? Did he believe he was saving the others? Or did he simply break under the weight of silence? The Flannan Isles Keepers have become a riddle we carry like a wound. And maybe that's the point. Their disappearance refuses neat explanation, because neat explanations are the lies we tell ourselves so we can sleep. The truth that human beings can be erased in a blink without witness, without reason, is far too heavy to bear. But I keep circling back to the last line in the log. God is over all. People read it as faith, as comfort, as resignation. But what if it wasn't? What if it was terror disguised as piety? What if it was Marshall's way of saying, something else is taking control here, and I can't fight it anymore? The lighthouse still stands, its light sweeping across the black water like a metronome of absence. Automated, sterile, empty of voices. But you can't automate away the silence. You can't code out the dread. Every flash of that beam is a reminder. Once, 3 men lived here, and then they didn't. We like to think of the world as mapped, measured, explainable. But sometimes the abyss wins. Sometimes the sea doesn't just take, it erases. And when you stare long enough at that stone tower on its lonely rock, you realize the most terrifying possibility isn't that we don't know what happened. It's that maybe we're not supposed to. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for listening. As usual, please leave any comments or feedback you may have, and I hope to see you all again in the next case.